lysergic acid diethylamide, a chemical compound capable of shattering reality itself. When consumed in sufficient quantities, this substance doesn't just alter perception, it obliterates it. Users report phenomena that defy explanation, reality melting into impossible geometries, sounds becoming colors, and perhaps most terrifying of all, the complete dissolution of identity. Your consciousness, everything you've ever understood yourself to be, simply ceases to exist. Today's account comes from the archives of Arrowwood, a digital repository documenting countless journeys into altered states. Some emerge enlightened, others return fundamentally changed. This particular experience falls into neither category. This is a story of psychological freefall, where one man's quest for expanded consciousness became a waking nightmare through the streets of Norwich. A decade ago, a man we'll call Hayes purchased his third tab of acid from a local dealer in Norwich, England. The blotter bore a strawberry design and came with a promise. This wasn't ordinary LSD. It had been double-dipped, concentrated beyond the standard dose. The dealer's reputation preceded him. His product was legendary for its potency. Money changed hands without hesitation. Hayes was only visiting Norwich briefly, reconnecting with old friends before returning home. On his final day, he made a decision that would haunt him for years. He would drop the tab and spend the experience at a friend's place, a safe haven, or so he believed. His friend knew the plan, left a spare key, and headed off to work. The stage was set. Late morning. Hayes placed the blotter on his tongue with an optimistic mindset. No dark thoughts plagued him. No anxiety crept at the edges of his consciousness. Just anticipation. This would mark both his inaugural and final experience tripping in solitude. Beyond the windows, sunlight bathed the city in warmth. Hayes felt no urge to venture outside. His temporary sanctuary would be enough. Then the chemical began its work. The familiar rushing sensation started. Electricity racing up his vertebrae, his stomach churning as the drug flooded his system. Unease crept in, but Hayes maintained his composure. He'd been here before. Surrender to the experience. Let it crest and plateau. Don't fight the wave. Eventually, the turbulence subsided. Hayes climbed the stairs and settled into the sun-drenched bedroom, radio playing softly. Pure bliss washed over him as he watched intricate patterns, reminiscent of Escher's impossible architectures, ripple across his skin like living tattoos. His reflection in the mirror revealed a face split by a wide grin, topographical lines flowing across his features like contour maps. Everything seemed perfect. Hayes vaguely remembers moving downstairs. The next conscious moment arrived without warning. He was sprawled on the dining room floor with no memory of how he'd gotten there. His first clear observation: flies hovering over a bowl of cat food in the adjacent kitchen. But these weren't ordinary insects. Each one trailed luminous after-images, neon streaks of crimson and electric blue, painting the air. Confusion set in. Why was he on the floor? Here's where the nightmare truly began. The blackout had completely erased Hayes' memory of ingesting anything. He'd forgotten the drug entirely. Before the trip, he'd written himself a safety note, reassurance for difficult moments. His fingers found the paper. Relief turned to horror as he tried to decode the words. The letters refused to stay still, morphing into alien symbols, dancing across the page in patterns that made no linguistic sense. That's when sanity fractured completely. 3 words escaped his lips. I've gone mad. His watch began beeping. some alarm he'd set for reasons now incomprehensible. An overwhelming compulsion seized him. He needed to be somewhere else, immediately. Without conscious thought, Hayes abandoned the house, leaving the back door gaping open, an invitation to any passing thief. His next awareness came on a crowded street, autopilot engaged, feet carrying him toward the city center. An old teacher's face emerged from the crowd, recognition flashing across their features. Hayes forced his facial muscles into something resembling a smile and kept walking. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just forward momentum. He wasn't walking with purpose or intent. Control had evaporated. He was a passenger in his own body, watching helplessly as it collided with a shopper, groceries scattering, curses following in his wake. His feet turned down an alley between houses, and then something truly bizarre happened. He walked straight through someone's back door, past the startled new resident, and out the front entrance of what had once been his own home. Somehow through intersections and traffic that should have killed him, Hayes reached the city center. He entered a cafe where his friend's son stood working behind the counter. The young man called out a greeting. Hayes walked past him as though he were furniture, sat briefly at a table, then stood and exited without uttering a single syllable. No hallucinations yet, just the disturbing sensation of being puppeteered by subconscious forces, guided by an agenda he couldn't comprehend. Zero cognitive function, pure automated movement. Then Hayes found himself approaching the Central Park, a place of childhood comfort and safety. But the LSD had other plans. The familiar transformed into the alien. Reality began its complete collapse. The people in the park were no longer human. Their heads had been replaced, removed and substituted with something from an oceanic nightmare. Imagine being surrounded by crowds whose heads have become writhing masses of cephalopod flesh. Tentacles where faces should be. Pale white appendages hanging down necks like serpentine beards. Every man, woman, and child had been transformed into these grotesque octopoid creatures, with eyes positioned where ears belong, watching, always watching. Even operating on autopilot, Hayes felt pure, undiluted terror. His feet made the decision to flee, carrying him across yet another major road, another moment where death somehow passed him by, toward a nearby apartment complex. Inside the multi-story building, Hayes became trapped in a psychological maze. He wandered the corridors in endless circles, convinced he was searching for an exit. The same sequence repeated. Walk the hallway, find a door, open it expecting escape, find only a janitor's closet filled with cleaning supplies. Close door. Repeat. Like an insect trapped against glass, throwing itself against the same window again and again, unable to comprehend the invisible barrier. Eventually, the loop broke. His memory jumps to wandering residential side streets, cutting through someone's backyard via an alley. A middle-aged woman spotted him, a stranger in her private space, fear flashing across her face as she rushed inside and locked the door. Hayes left, found himself squeezing between two garages, the gap impossibly narrow. In his mind, reality had become a tightening spiral. He was marching relentlessly inward, the walls closing in. If he continued, the spiral would crush him down to his component atoms. This realization somehow freed him from the pattern, and he emerged next to another main road. Standing before someone's garden, looking at the garden triggered a new horror. His mouth felt wrong. Not flesh, but vegetation. When he attempted to scream, his tongue extended outward as a hybrid of human tissue and thorny rose stems. The situation was deteriorating exponentially with each passing moment. Across the road stood a dental repair workshop, discreet and professional. Hayes walked in without announcement, past confused workers calling after him and back out again, still guided by the invisible autopilot that had seized control. The adjacent street would become the setting for his trip's most terrifying crescendo. Like a lemming, Hayes stepped off the curb, crossed the side road, reached the opposite pavement, and plummeted 7 feet straight down into a basement flat. The stairs must have been there, leading down to the concrete pit below, but he hadn't registered their existence. Even if he had, he wouldn't have known how to use them. Somehow he climbed back to street level, limping now, making his way up a dead-end road. Subconscious memory recognized the area. An ex-girlfriend once lived here. He found himself at her old door, one of those aluminum-framed types with double glazing. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. What he saw was something from a Francis Bacon painting. Anguished flesh streaked with what appeared to be black oil, dripping like blood down his distorted form. He felt himself falling through infinite darkness, a meat sack of bones dropping forever through space. Periodically, he crashed through panes of glass that shattered and sliced his falling body. The sound of breaking glass accompanied a single word, repeated in waves of increasing intensity. Mad, 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 mad. Falling, tearing, fragmenting through darkness with glass shards tumbling alongside him. The auditory and visual assault drove him to his knees. Suddenly he was 7 years old, lying on the pavement. His best friend's parents hovered above, concern etched on their faces. Someone said he'd hit his head. Someone else called for an ambulance. During this flashback, a disc-shaped opening appeared in the sky above, an arm reaching down, trying to pull him to safety. He reached up toward the hand but couldn't make contact. The portal vanished, back to staggering along the street. At the cul-de-sac's base, Hayes looked up. The sky looked back. Each cloud had transformed into a massive amoeba-like organism, their surfaces covered in pulsating dots that shifted color like cuttlefish skin. And each creature possessed a single enormous blue eye, distinctly human, observing his every movement. Voices emerged from these entities taunting him, calling him stupid, mocking him for seeking answers, telling him he'd destroyed his consciousness. The amoebas sang an endless, maddening song with incomprehensible lyrics that repeated thousands of times. Then reality became a cosmic clock face, billions of dots between each second, clicking forward relentlessly like a second hand. Each dot represented someone's entire lifetime. His internal monologue narrated this revelation. Living and dying were links in an eternal chain, and the clock was measuring it all. Then the voice laughed at his horror. Hayes regained enough awareness to realize he was stumbling through a children's playground. The geography matters here. Adjacent to the cul-de-sac ran a small pathway with 4 flights of stone stairs descending to Park Lane below. Behind the playground's fence lay a steep, overgrown embankment leading down to a gravel parking area behind the Park Lane Hotel. Guess which route Hayes took? He pushed through the fence gap, failed to notice the dangerous drop, and tumbled down the embankment into the flint gravel lot. By now he was crawling on hands and knees. A sharp piece of flint tore through his palm, creating a wound resembling stigmata, appropriate for what came next. Looking up from his bleeding hand, Hayes saw the parking lot transform into an ocean of holes. The ground became a white void filled with infinite swarming black dots. Air raid sirens wailed. Wasps buzzed. Looking down again at this sea of dots, he spotted a cross, and upon it, a festering pile of organs and viscera spread across the wood, staining it crimson. The ruined flesh crawled with wasps, their stingers pumping venom into the meat, an image of impossible suffering. The internal monologue returned, booming over the sirens and insect droning. This is Christ, still suffering for your sins, still paying the price. More laughter, a flash of reality. Hayes chose to cross Park Lane. He collapsed in the gutter on the opposite side. His jacket was gone. His body was covered in cuts and abrasions. A wasp landed on his elbow, feeding from one of his wounds. He tried to brush it away. It stung him. He managed to remove the insect and spotted a woman pushing a stroller, concern on her face. For one precious second, seeing her granted him sanity. The moment she passed from view, he plunged back into the nightmare. His body had become a massive green mound of flesh punctured everywhere by cactus-like thorns that had grown from within, piercing through his skin. No arms, no legs, just tendrils. His form was pure pain, nothing more, nothing less. A police car pulled up. Someone exited. He was floating in an ocean of holes, billions of them, each one a passage leading to an identical ocean of swarming black dots. The monologue informed him that only one hole led away from this place. In a single blink, everything changed. He was lying on a padded vinyl mattress in a hospital, medical staff surrounding him. He noticed he had a human shape again. At that moment, the door swung open to reveal an idyllic countryside scene, rolling green hills bathed in glorious sunlight, a friendly oak tree in the foreground. If he could only crawl through those doors, his soul would be saved. But he couldn't move. The door swung shut and reopened. Now just a hospital corridor, someone on a stretcher being wheeled past. In that instant, he knew his salvation was lost, back to the sea of holes. But something had changed. Hayes realized that wherever he directed his gaze, the black dots disappeared. For the first time in this nightmare, he felt conscious hope. He began eliminating swaths of dots with sweeping glances. "What have you taken?" Gaining hope by the minute, stripping away the black dots, removing the false exits. "What have you taken? Was it acid?" Surrounded by a self-created white void of comfort, he gazed at the final cluster of black dots, knowing his release from hell depended on these remaining few. He's out of it still. He eliminated all but 2 black dots, these 2 connected by a bridge, a line like in a connect the dots puzzle. His internal voice returned, yelling, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Then the 2 dots resolved into his own hands with cuffs around them. The black line had become a visible chain. The white void faded, revealing the hospital room. He was on his back on a bed, arms secured behind him. He'd been looking through his legs at his own wrists, chafed from police handcuffs. He screamed for them to remove the restraints. A male and female police officer were in the room. The same officers who'd lifted him from the Park Lane gutter and brought him here. The male officer complied, removing the cuffs. The female asked basic questions. His name? Did he know where he was? He could only manage a groan. They looked frustrated and left him alone. Reality rapidly reassembled itself. Hayes remembered dropping acid earlier. The hospital surroundings and his injuries confirmed that whatever had happened, it had gone catastrophically wrong. He sat on the bed's edge, noted several missing possessions, found his shoes in the bedside cabinet, and took his first deliberate steps across the room. The bizarre experience had one final twist. Hayes opened the door to his single room. A few feet away, the two police officers stood facing each other, engaged in an intense discussion about what to do with him. They were so absorbed in their conversation that neither noticed as he emerged and began walking down the hospital corridor. He found a floor-to-ceiling window that pivoted on a central vertical axis. Judging he could fit through the gap, he squeezed through and escaped. Little remains to tell except that his walk from the hospital to the train station was agonizing. Stitches in his chin, elbow, and hand, his right forearm swollen purple. Still semi-hallucinating but acutely aware he'd nearly died. No legal consequences for slipping away from the police. He caught a train back to Suffolk, outside Norfolk police jurisdiction. But they'd contacted his father. Explanations were owed to both his girlfriend and his dad. In retrospect, it remains the worst day of his entire life. The closest he can imagine to full-blown psychosis. A miracle he didn't end up on someone's hood, or worse. Does he believe the symbols and messages from that day? He's not entirely certain. He now understands that intense adrenaline while hallucinating can drag consciousness into an abyss of fear, creating worst-case scenarios. If he believed any of what he saw was true, life would seem impossibly bleak. He's had other experiences that were glorious, polar opposites of that day. Heaven and hell are both valid states of consciousness. It depends on where you are mentally and how you navigate the experience. The one puzzle, the blackout. If he hadn't lost consciousness early in the trip, he probably wouldn't have forgotten he'd taken a drug, and therefore wouldn't have panicked himself into an eternal hell fractal. This report, shared in October 2003, stands as a warning about experimenting with powerful psychedelics without proper preparation, support, or respect for their reality-shattering potential. What are your thoughts on this experience? Share in the comments below